Any fan or casual filmgoer could tell you the past 3 years in the entertainment industry have not been great. This is especially true for Marvel. The last few entries of the MCU have left a bitter taste in the mouth of consumers, and I have to say, I am definitely one of those people.
You make me sad.
So, going into Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I was skeptical on whether or not it was going to be worth my time. Upon the movie being over, I remember looking at my wife and saying, if I could paint a picture based on what I would want the ending of the Guardians of the Galaxy to be, this would have been adjacent to that. In other words, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 felt like a breath of fresh air, as it was the first superhero movie since Spider-Man No Way Home. Oh god, that feels like forever ago by now. That actually felt really enjoyable to watch. In order to discuss what was good and what was unfortunately bad in the movie, I do have to give a summary of the plot. For those of you who haven't seen it and are worried, my spoiler-free recommendation is that you should still go see it in the theaters, and you might want to do so quickly, as it might be your last chance for a good or at least competent MCU experience at the cinema. The movie starts with the Guardians of the Galaxy at their new base of operations in Nowhere, which you would know if you watched the holiday special. I'm guessing some of you didn't. I know that I haven't yet. I had to watch clips.
What a noob.
The movie starts with the Guardians at their new base of operations, and it's obvious that the Guardians are not quite at their best. Star-Lord is hitting the bottle hard because he is upset about Gamora's death in Infinity War, and the fact that the new Gamora we met in Endgame basically wants nothing to do with him. Apparently this has been a problem for a while, and the Guardians don't really know how to help him. Then almost immediately after we see this, and I'm not kidding, it was like 2 minutes into the film that this happens, a golden-faced man named Adam flies into their home and beats up the Guardians pretty good. I have to say really quick that while the fight scenes were entertaining in this movie, it did feel like the characters were basically immortal in those scenes. It was like I was watching a Mortal Kombat game. At least, until it stopped being convenient to the plot. Anyways, Rocket gets badly injured and Star-Lord tries to help, but they can't operate on Rocket because there's a kill switch in him that's been activated, and now he only has 48 hours to live. So the Guardians team up with the Ravengers to sneak into a company headquarters in order to get the passkey and fix Rocket. This is also when they discover the Ravengers are now being led by Gamora. Or rather, the new Gamora. Okay. I'm going to have to start referring to these two as Dead Gamora and Endgame Gamora, or Infinity War Gamora and Endgame Gamora, because if I don't, I'm going to bash my head into this keyboard. I can't afford to go this crazy. I'm so broke. Anyways, so the gang, alongside Endgame Gamora, sneak into a base that's made of living tissue, because I guess James Gunn really wanted to make something that looked gross and weird.
Oh, God, gross and weird! Chris!
Exactly. So they make it into the facility where more scenes of Peter and Endgame Gamora ensue, and I have to say these early scenes in the movie were important, but they are unbearably cringy. I get that these scenes needed to be done so that we could develop Peter and have him go through his trauma, but it felt like these scenes just went on forever and they stopped being funny very quickly. There's a scene where they are in an elevator and Star-Lord basically info dumps the entirety of his plotline just to spite Endgame Gamora. Like, it wasn't even that funny and it just drags on forever. You see the clip in the trailers, go watch it there if you want to know what I'm talking about. There are more scenes like this where serious moments end with ridiculous attempts at humor, or they drag on to the point where we question what the joke even is. Anyway, I digress. They find out the passkey was removed from the system of the company very conveniently and was downloaded into another guy, making the entire film up to this point utterly pointless, but hey, whatever. So they find out they need to go find the man who created Rocket, a man named the High Evolutionary, whose ultimate goal is that he wants to make the universe perfect and tries to accomplish this by experimenting on animals. It's during this time that we're also experiencing flashbacks to Rocket's life before he met the Guardians or Groot. Back when Groot looked like this. I really miss the way that this looked because I absolutely hate this new Groot. Why does he have to look so bulky? It's so weird. These scenes are the best in the movie as they are emotionally heavy, very well acted, and it brings some life and humanity, ironically, to Rocket as a character even though he's a raccoon.
Don't call me a raccoon!
I'm sorry. I took it too far. I meant Trash Panda.
Yeah, there's closure on that as well. Anyways, they find the High Evolutionary at his home of Counter Earth. Look, I know this is a thing from the comics and he explains why he made it this way in the movie, but it still seems stupid to me. They get the passkey and save Rocket, and then they fight with the High Evolutionary and save a bunch of the experiments that he has left on his ship. A combination of people as well as animals, just like Rocket. Oh yeah, he blows up Counter Earth too. By the way, if it seems like I'm blowing through a lot of these things really quickly, it's because I am, but that's only because that's how it's paced in the movie too. The second act really speeds up compared to the first. Rocket and the High Evolutionary face off. There's a payoff for what happens to him at the beginning of the movie. He calls himself Rocket Raccoon. The High Evolutionary dies off screen when his ship blows up. The day is saved, and the Guardians of the Galaxy end the movie by all going their separate ways. And that's the movie in a nutshell. Needless to say, this movie has a lot going on for all the praise it's getting. It does have problems that hold it back from greatness. But I will start off by talking overall about the things I liked in this movie. For one thing, the effects in this movie all looked really good. The CGI was all rendered almost perfectly. Even if I don't necessarily agree with or understand some of the design choices, the effects all look beautiful and well rendered. Keep in mind, this is from a studio that made this recently.
This was fun! No!
I'm just saying, okay? Next thing I will compliment on is the acting. Everyone here is giving it their all. I especially like the actor who played the High Evolutionary, the gravitas behind his performance, and the fact that when he emoted, he really wasn't afraid to just make his character look ugly. And that's dedication. I applaud it. The Guardians themselves are, of course, all well acted. I can't complain about their performances. I can feel the love that they have for these roles. It's just science. Finally, I applaud James Gunn for his writing simply because I like that this feels like a satisfactory ending for our Guardians crew. Everything with them comes full circle, and if I were to never see these characters again, I would honestly be okay with it. And I mean that in a good way, of course. Okay, is it time for me to start complaining about things?
Yes, get over it!
Okay. For a start, the humor does not always land, which I did cover a bit previously. I do think that while James Gunn has a love for these films that we can feel, and it definitely shows in his work, I don't know that it was the best call to give him complete control. I'd honestly compare it with Taika Waititi and Ragnarok versus his writing in Love and Thunder. Granted, it's not nearly as bad here, but it is the closest thing that I could think of. See, this movie, as well as Guardians of the Galaxy 2, were both written and directed by Gunn, and that means that the cringy humor that permeates this film is basically his fault. The tone of this movie is all over the place. One minute we are watching people literally get burned alive or have their heads blown off, and the next minute there's toilet humor being portrayed on the screen. I mean, come on, man. I don't need to see Gamora on the toilet. It's not that funny. Also, while I praise the relationship between Star-Lord and Endgame Gamora being resolved, I found this version of Gamora honestly to be really rude and a huge jerk. Like, it got to the point where it seemed like she was going to be one of the villains in the movie herself. Keep in mind that Endgame Gamora is supposed to be the same Gamora we meet during Guardians of the Galaxy 1 in 2014. Like, the entire movie I kept thinking,
Damn. That is just a mean lady.
Also, after years of appearances in the movies, I gotta say this, I know I'm gonna get flack for it, but I have to say it, I do not like Drax. His thing never really works for me, as he was just unbearable in this movie, and even in previous movies I wasn't the biggest fan of him. Like, I get it, he's supposed to be like an immature straight man character alongside like Nebula or Gamora, but he's just so stupid. And it's not even in a funny way. Like I said before, the comedy in this film just has really high highs, but it also has very low lows. Like, some of the jokes in the movie were really funny. There's a scene specifically with Nebula trying to get into a vehicle with Star-Lord, and there's an F-bomb dropped, and it's actually really funny when it happens. Then you have things like P jokes, and you have Drax just being utterly embarrassing for the whole thing. It was so distracting. Also, as far as characters go, I got what the High Evolutionary wanted to do. He wants to make a perfect universe. And I got the where and the how by making Counter-Earth and evolving creatures. But the biggest question I had in this movie, especially for this character, is why is he doing any of this? What's it all for? What exactly was this guy's motivation for doing really anything? I do still like the villain and think the way he ties into Rocket's backstory is integral and very well done. And sometimes it's fun just to see a villain who is just utterly crazy, but his motivations are never really made clear to me. Like, Endgame Gamora had more of a motivation than this guy for why she was helping the Guardians. By the way, if anyone was excited to see Adam Warlock in this movie, you're going to be bitterly disappointed. He may be the worst character in the entire series of movies because he doesn't do anything. All he does is say stupid lines, punch things, and is there to be a Deus Ex Machina at the end of the film. Sorry to all the Will Poulter fans. I won't criticize things like the soundtrack or the color palette of this movie. It fits Gunn's style, and I did rather like the music that they use in the movie. I just can't help it. I love the soundtrack so much. I gotta give points for the cool songs and the goofy colors. Look, those things are prevalent in all of his movies, and for the most part, it works, so I'll let it go here. Finally, while I praise the ending of this movie and the closure it gave for the Guardians, and I did enjoy watching it despite its problems, it's just another reminder that this is truly the end of an era. The end of good Disney Marvel movies. Because James Gunn will never work for the House of Mouse again after the way they treated him, and I really don't blame him. Many other people are leaving the MCU in droves. And if anybody says you should be excited, get real. Because the next MCU movie is The Marvels, and literally no one is excited for that movie to come out. I still recommend Guardians of the Galaxy 3 despite my various complaints, and anyone watching should go see it. Not because it should give you hope for the future, but because it will remind you that a good MCU movie can be made, but only if the people in charge actually care about it. So to wrap things up, I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a 7 out of 10. Until next time, stay frosty.